The Seattle Seahawks have had quite the offseason, and the two biggest roster changes they made were trading Russell Wilson to the Broncos and the flat-out release of linebacker Bobby Wagner. Both players were veterans and a part of the 2012 draft class, and with Seattle, this is a team in a very tough division, as they not only have the defending Super Bowl champions to play twice in the Los Angeles Rams, they also have a team that went to the NFC Championship game to play twice in the San Francisco 49ers, and the other team in their division, while not on the same level as the Rams, and a 23-point loss to them in the postseason points to that, but the Arizona Cardinals aren't exactly a cellar dweller by any means either. So when you play in what I think is the second best division in football, only to the AFC West, you have to ask the question here: what exactly are the Seahawks' plans moving forward? And we're going to try and answer that in today's video, and try and make some sense of all of this and everything that's taken place over the course of the past couple of months. And without further ado, let's begin. And when discussing the Seahawks over the past few years and how they've gotten to the point where they are, the Jamal Adams trade always comes up, and understandably so. They traded 2 first-round picks for him in July of 2020 and a third-round pick, and at the time I was never a huge fan of the trade because of the limitations Jamal has as a safety. In the most prolific passing era we've ever seen in NFL history, he is by no means an Ed Reed type player who could pop off for an 8 or 9 or 10 interception season and potentially win a Defensive Player of the Year award. But to be clear, I didn't hate this trade either, because Seattle thought, with Russ, DK, Tyler Lockett, and Bobby Wagner at the time among many others, that if they get a player who can contribute in big ways on the defensive side of the ball, this could propel them towards the second Super Bowl of the Russell Wilson era. I didn't hate it, but I definitely wasn't all for it either. And when Russ went down, we saw how much the Seahawks depend on him, and it wasn't pretty, and one of those picks they traded for Jamal is now the 10th overall pick in the 2022 draft. Seattle wouldn't have been on the clock until 41st overall before the Russell Wilson trade, and with Russ exploring options or providing the team a list of cities last offseason he would like to play in, I thought it was only a matter of time until they dealt Russ, and we got that last month. And whether you think Drew Lock can ever be a serviceable quarterback, I personally do not think he can be. The Seahawks roster is not good, and on top of it, you'd be playing a below-average starting quarterback in one of the toughest divisions in football. And to pile on this even more, this isn't a great draft class, and the quarterbacks are okay. I mean, they're certainly not a 2020 or 2021 caliber, and they're also not what next year's will be in 2023. And one thing that truly baffles me with Seattle is they kept Pete Carroll through all of this and are going to at least let him attempt a rebuild, and that is perhaps the craziest thing within all of this, is they're letting a coach who is 70 years old and who has been there for over a decade now attempt a rebuild, and a coach who a lot of fans are fed up with because of poor in-game management and lack of results over the past few years, which reverts us back to the title of today's video: what are the Seattle Seahawks doing? And one thing that has to be remembered when discussing NFL teams and locker rooms is, yeah, we see them on TV every week and we watch our favorite teams and players play, but please remember, this is a business, and when teams are bad, generally the morale on the team is low. There's of course exceptions, and I think the 2021 Lions show that, but when you look at the 2022 Seahawks schedule, of course they'll play in the division twice, but they also have games at Arrowhead against the Chiefs, at SoFi against the Chargers, at Tampa against the Bucs, in addition to the 6 they'll play in the NFC West, and the schedule has not been released yet. So what if they come out of the gate and play at Tampa week 1, or even at Kansas City, and then play the Rams at home in week 2, then go to SoFi in week 3 to play the Chargers? You're very quickly looking at a team that at best would be 1-2, and I don't know who they would beat out of the 3. That's more so me being optimistic than anything, as I do believe they would start out 0-3, but at that point the locker room would have to be like, yep, we're done, we're not going to come out of this hole, and the season is effectively over. I think that with the Seahawks here, their goal entering the 2022 NFL Draft has to be best player available anytime they are on the clock. And this is a hypothetical, but if the Jets offered picks 35 and 38 for DK Metcalf, take it, period. You would be doing DK a disservice to keep him in Seattle these next few years when you're going to consistently be a 5 to 6 win team, really at most, when you can get 2 top 40 picks for a player who I would imagine would probably become disgruntled because of the lack of team success, and you help the rebuild in the process. And I think if you can get 2 top 40 picks for DK Metcalf, that's a huge win for them. And normally I'm not a proponent of blow everything up, but in this case I 100% am. A few months ago, the Raiders had a challenge presented to them. Either let the divisional teams walk right over you, or try and fight back, and they traded for Jamal Adams and signed Chandler Jones, and I commend the hell out of them for doing so. But the situations are extremely different, as Las Vegas took the team that went to the Super Bowl in Cincinnati to the wire in the playoffs, and Seattle finished with the 10th worst record in the entire league and downgraded at quarterback big time already this offseason, so there is a major difference between the two franchises. And when you look at the Seahawks roster, I'd like to ask you, the viewer, a genuine question here. How many wins do you see with this group of guys? Drew Lock wasn't good in Denver, and to suggest he's going to carry this team to anywhere other than a 4th place finish in the division, to me, is absurd. The Seahawks are a product of what happens when you continuously miss on first-round picks, as their last few first-round picks have been Jordan Brooks, a hit. He's a beast. I actually like him a lot. LJ Collier, a huge bust. Rashad Penny, a bust who had a good 5-game stretch in his 4th year in the NFL. No first-round pick in 2017. And Jermaine Ifedi, a tackle who played 4 years for Seattle and left. So when you draft these players in the first round to be starters on your team for the next 6 to 8 years is what you envision when you draft these guys, or sometimes even longer, and the overwhelming majority do not pan out, it's not a surprise that the team itself is not good. And then of course you can even factor in Jamal Adams and his 2 first-round selections in there. Now, for as much as I've criticized this shit out of the Seahawks this video, I do want to give credit to their 2020 draft, because Jordan Brooks and Darrell Taylor is a great draft class. Those are 2 good football players you can build around for a while, and those are guys you want both in your locker room and of course on the field. But unfortunately for the 2 good picks they've made over the past few years, and you can throw DK in there to make it 3, they've done several things wrong to undo any progress they've made, while the division rival 49ers went from having 2 top 5 picks in 3 years, in 2017 and 2019, to legitimate Super Bowl contender year in and year out. For all of the progress San Francisco has made over the past half-decade, Seattle has met it with regression, and while they will certainly miss Russell Wilson this year, and it will show in a big way, one thing people may not realize is the Seahawks have just 1 playoff win in the past 5 years, and it was in Philly against the Josh McCown-led Eagles in the game Carson Wentz got hurt. So this has been brewing for some time, and it's nothing new to Seattle. They've been on the downward trend, and I think 2022 will certainly be the bottoming out for the franchise, because this season at this point looks pretty hopeless for them, and I don't see how you can spin it that unless Matt Stafford or Kyler Murray have season-ending injuries, that Seattle finishes anywhere other than last in the NFC West. Admittedly, at a point in time, I thought they were going to try and trade for Baker Mayfield because the cost would be insanely cheap, and really all they'd have to do is take on his salary, but I don't think that's a move they are going to try and make anymore. If they do, good for them, but at that point I think they would rather go with Drew Lock for the 2022 season specifically, and when he predictably does not become a franchise quarterback, they are going to try and get either Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, or a quarterback who will rise up the draft boards this fall, similar to how Kenny Pickett did in his final season at Pitt. Seattle is seemingly going with the old school approach in rebuilding, and the 2022 season will be the worst of the worst, mainly because of who they'll have on their roster. If they have another bad season in 2023, it is under the assumption they will have selected a quarterback in the first round, and that's who their long-term guy would be. But even then, the route to becoming a successful franchise is still going to be a long way to the top, because Matt Stafford is 34, he's not 40. The 49ers have a quarterback in their second season, and at worst have Jimmy G, who took them to a Super Bowl appearance and isn't very good, so Trey Lance becoming a quarterback that can appear in a Super Bowl really isn't that lofty expectations, and the Cardinals are going to be consistently in the hunt and never a team you circle on your calendar for an easy win. It would tremendously benefit Seattle to have the 10th overall pick back and have back-to-back picks of 9 and 10 and use one on a pass rusher and an offensive lineman to build for their future, but at least they recovered a top 10 pick and then some for Russ to initiate their rebuild. But the days of Seattle heavily competing are over, and the next few years they will be going through are going to be some of the toughest times they've had as a franchise. After this year, I would love for them to go in a different direction and to move on from Pete Carroll so they can get a new regime in and build the next generation of Seahawks to their liking, and if they're lucky, build another Super Bowl contending team. And with that being said, that's all I have for today's video. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, now is the time I ask you to please leave a like and subscribe to the channel, because it would truly mean the world. And until next time, as always, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.